and share on our website. I'm Karen Hills. I manage the Sustainable Farms and Fields program for the Washington State Conservation Commission. And thanks for joining today. I'm here to talk about the tool that we are asking applicants for the Alternative Manure Management funding to use as the preferred tool. It's new to the commission, new to this program, so wanted to have a webinar that will live on our website to walk through how to use it. Also on here is Nina Gibson's contact information. She is a climate smart livestock policy specialist with the Washington State Department of Agriculture Dairy Nutrient Management Program. It's the first non-regulatory position in the Dairy Nutrient Management Program, and she will be offering some assistance to me, particularly with helping folks use this tool. So I have her contact info there. If you're not sure, you're welcome to reach out to me and I can air traffic control people over to Nina as needed. But she does have background as a dairy inspector, and she may be joining us on the call. I think she had a farrier coming at the same time. So anyway, we'll get started today and kind of go through what the plan is for today's webinar. I'm going to just give a brief review of the Alternative Manure Management funding opportunity that this tool is relevant for. We had a full webinar on that recently, so if you're interested in more details, you can find that on the Climate Smart Livestock webpage at the Commission website. And then we're going to talk about this CARB AMP tool that is the focus of today's webinar, just kind of go through what it looks like, what the different sections are, and then we'll work through an example of entering a project into that tool. And I couldn't fit them on the first slide, so here I just put our Climate Commitment Act logo and verbiage, which is just a reminder that this funding is coming from the Climate Commitment Act towards this program. So the scoring criteria for this funding opportunity, this is kind of the broad brushstrokes of that scoring criteria. And you can see that 1/4 of the points are really related to the estimated greenhouse gas reduction, and which is the reason why it's really important to have a tool to estimate that. And that's kind of where we landed on, in our advisory committee, we had a lot of discussions around which tool to use. There's a lot of different tools out there in the world that can be used to estimate greenhouse gas emissions from agricultural systems. And we landed on this CARB tool, the California Air Resources Board tool, for a number of reasons. It's one of them is that although we're still waiting for interim guidance from Ecology, who manages the Climate Commitment Act reporting on what kind of tool they're needing us to use for reporting the impacts of these projects, it's looking like in the long term they're going towards CARB protocols where they exist. We're also looking for a tool that was widely accessible to conservation district planners and was able to kind of incorporate both emissions reductions from the manure itself and from the energy use in handling the manure. So just a little background on the California Department of Food and Ag program in alternative manure management. This was kind of put into place and began awarding funds in 2017. So it's been around for a number of years. Much higher budget than what we're dealing with. For example, in 2023, 31 projects totaling over 21 million were funded through this California program. But really, we're kind of piggybacking on some of the work that took place in California, where CDFA worked with the California Air Resources Board to develop a tool to quantify greenhouse gas benefits. So really able to kind of launch this a little bit more quickly than we would be able to otherwise because of that that work that has occurred already in California on this. So I am going to pause there and probably stop my screen sharing of my PowerPoint and move over to sharing my screen with the tool, but maybe it's a good time to answer some questions, Sarah, if you could help me with that.
Yeah. Well, so far we have a question from Jake about what can be covered by the TA. And then Bob has his hand up after that.
Okay. So the TA funds that can be covered through this program would be technical assistance to work with the producer on the implementation of the specific project. So that could be usually staff time is the biggest piece of that. There could be an overhead component. There could be travel, mileage costs involved with site visits, that sort of thing. Hopefully that helps answer the question and clarify if you need any additional details. Hey, Bob, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So my role in manure handling is my supplier of horse manure with wood chip bedding for my composting operation is about 30 cubic yards a month. It is all aerobic. Some of it goes into my composting, and some of it gets spread on my my old pasture areas. I take it that that is not part of this operation, given your use of the word anaerobic.
Correct. Yeah, there. I would recommend maybe taking a look at Sustainable Farms and Fields in its classic form, because there are some practices there that may be a better fit. We have funded manure spreaders through Sustainable Farms and Fields. And there's some other kind of waste management pieces. This funding opportunity is really focused on those anaerobic manure storage conditions, because that's where really you have the best opportunity to reduce methane production, which is kind of the big focus here of this funding. Mm-hmm. Okay, are there any more questions before I move on?
I don't see any in the chat. Anyone else? I think you're safe to proceed.
Okay, great. So hopefully you can see the Excel spreadsheet on my screen. I'm gonna talk through this tool, which is the CARB AMP tool. If you're interested in kind of finding out the sort of what's happening behind the scenes with this, there's a quantification methodology that is available from CARB. Hopefully Sarah can drop the link in the chat. But basically, CARB had a compliance offset protocol for livestock projects that formed the basis for this tool, and then they kind of built it out to include a few more functions. So what we did just in the last really couple of months, we worked with an engineer at CARB who's really responsible for this tool, and JD Ryan, a data scientist at WSDA, to kind of go in and make a few tweaks to make this usable in Washington. And you'll see on this spreadsheet that there's a change log tab here, which really gives the details of what was done to change it for use in Washington, which was essentially just adjusting the mean monthly temperature data by county, and the electricity use factor emissions information was adjusted based on data from ecology. And then we did a little bit just in terms of, putting on our own branding and taking off practices that were are eligible in California, but we've opted to not include as eligible in Washington. So mostly because of funding limitations. So I'm going to walk through each tab here, talk about it, and then we're going to go through an example. There is a user guide that you can access through this link here, which basically just links back to the California materials. So we don't have kind of Washington specific materials available at this point, maybe in the future, but what we wanted to do is we wanted to get this application opened up and this funding out in the world and really have kind of a way to compare the anticipated impact of these projects using an apples to apples comparison as much as possible. I should say from the outset that there may be situations where this tool can't capture or estimate the information or the greenhouse gas impact of your project. We understand that that may be the case. This has been road tested in California. It hasn't been road tested here. And so that's why the commission is saying that this is a preferred tool for this funding, not a required tool. So if you get to that situation when you're working on submitting your application, talk to me. We'll try to help you figure out what the next best option is. Okay, so this is just kind of an area to put in your project information, and then you get into the README with some of the background information on this tool and the link to this to the user's guide. We have definitions of some of the manure management systems that are referenced in this tool. These are all coming from the original CARB tool. You'll notice that there is no mention of NRCS practices. So there's going to be a little bit of crosswalking that district planners will probably need to do in terms of, understanding the NRCS practices that are applicable to the project that is being proposed. It's interesting that California seemed to veer away from those use of those practice terms in their categories here. I did want to point out this open solar drying and closed solar drying, as well as natural gas heating of manure that's been separated are options that we removed in this version. The other option that we opted to remove, just in case you're noticing in the California materials, is that California funds movement of animals from a confined setting where the manure is collected into a pasture, more time on pasture. That may be an opportunity in the future if this becomes ongoing funding, but we knew that with this amount of funding, we were probably going to need to cut some pieces of it, and that's one that we chose to not fund in this current iteration. So this is basically your project data inputs tab, which is where you're going to do most of your work. You're going to start out with your location. There's a drop down with counties. listed here, and I'm just going to go ahead and work through an example that I have that I will also drop in the chat, and you can feel free to open the tool on your own and probably a lot of text and work through an example as well. So you have your project county. We're gonna, for this example, we're gonna say that this operation is in Grant County. And then we have our livestock population by category. So one thing that you will notice in here, I'm gonna try to, oops, wrong way. Try to get that a little smaller so that I can see more of it at once. But one thing you'll notice is that you're going to see a lot of different types of livestock in here. Goats, horses, sheep. Keep in mind that we're talking about liquid manure, so don't get thrown off by that. Most of the time we're going to be talking about dairy cows. And so in this case, we have 400 milking lactating dairy cows in free stalls. So I select lactating dairy cow free stalls. I put in an animal population, which in this case is 400. And you will notice something that's going to happen when I enter this. Look, that box goes black and a range is displayed here. We made this spreadsheet operate this way because we're trying to prepare for the potential that there may be public records requests, which of course any application for funding that is submitted to the commission is subject to public records request, and we're trying to make it less work on ourselves if we do need to go in and take out animal numbers and put in a range. So you'll see the same thing in the application materials for this program. Okay, so going down to our next animal category, and note this, these are just the animals. You only want to include the animals that, you know, this project is applicable to. If you have another group of animals and their manure is not collected in an area where this project is being implemented, then you leave them out of all these calculations. Okay, but in this case, we have.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Karen?
Sure, yeah.
Bob was suggesting maybe we could make it a little bit bigger, or we could see more of the spreadsheet.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We went to the bottom to get it up to 100%, or to
yeah,
the home, or at the top, there's the maximize button. Sorry.
No, this is okay. These are good things to learn about Excel that I don't.
So go up top just to the maybe.
I'm trying to, is it view?
Or do you think the percentage zoom at the bottom?
100? Is that better? Hopefully.
How's that, Bob? Okay, let's try it and see how that goes. Thank you.
I am realizing that there's a few more things I could learn about Excel. All right, so we have 100 dry cows. And I wanted to point out in these categories, you have this grazing. I think these were where it says cattle, calves grazing, cattle, cows grazing. I think this was meant for beef cattle. So usually when we do dairy, we're going to be using these top categories rather than those bottom ones. Okay, and then in this example, we also have 100 heifers. So it says cattle, heifers on feed. And if they are in pasture some of the time, that's fine. It's going to give us an option for specifying how much time on pasture those animals have. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the numbers here. So we had 100 dry cows. And that's going to black out and populate that range. And then we had 100 heifers. Okay. So now we go down. It gives us a spot to enter the fat, protein, and milk produced for these animals. I will enter it in here. It's one of those things that it's not required. I can probably should have changed that, but missed that in putting this together. So it's not, if you don't put it in here, it's not going to like, you know, keep you from moving forward in the application. And 3%, it just does a little correction so that it gives, I think in California, maybe they do a comparison based on a corrected fat and protein numbers. Okay, so now we're going to go down to the baseline manure management practices, where we're going to get to spell out, you know, exactly what the current system is. So right now, in this example, we have a flush system for free stalls and milking parlors. So we're going to select flush. The other options, I'm sorry, this is so small. Other options are partial scrape, partial flush, vacuum truck, scrape, vacuum truck, compost bedded pack barn, pit storage below animal confinements, and aerated vermifiltration system. So there's your flush, which is the current situation. And in this example, that these animals are at pasture 6 months of the year for 12 hours a day. And this is just gonna adjust your the amount of manure that is going into the lagoon in the baseline scenario. So it looks like what we're doing, there's no solid separation in the baseline scenario. And then now we're going to move over to the manure management practices after implementation of project. And this will give you some options. We're going to select this first option, which is installation of a compost bedded pack barn. You'll see below there's also other options that involve slatted floor pit storage manure collection, solid separation, scrape conversion. I think that's all of those. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, this is a relatively simple example. In some cases, you may have primary or secondary stage solid separation to enter in the baseline or the project implementation columns. So we don't in this case, so we're going to leave those blank. But what we do want to enter is information about electricity consumption and diesel fuel consumption associated with manure management activities. So this could be a pump that's being used. This could be, you know, trucking manure to a field. And really what we're looking at here is like, what's the difference between them? So in this case, we are, the current electricity consumption is 200 megawatt hours per year. And this is going to be decreased once the project is implemented to 150 megawatt hours per year due to less electricity used, since the pumps in the flush system will not be as active. And now we're going to enter the diesel used. So the diesel use is going to increase in this scenario. And of course, these are estimates. It's just kind of do your best to estimate what that fuel use currently is and what that fuel use is expected to look like under the project scenario. So in this case, the diesel use is increasing because of, you know, using equipment to turn and, you know, deal with the bedding in the pack barn, compost bedded pack barn. So, and then we just go down And below, you just have the option to basically describe how you're coming up with these numbers above. What is the, what's the source of the change? So here we'll just say pump in flush system, and then it's asking you what the fuel type is. So we'll say electricity, and then it's asking for a relative change in emissions to baseline. Is it a new source? Is it decreasing? Is it increasing? So this is a decrease in electrical use for that flush pump. And then we have the, I don't know, what do we call that? I guess equipment or bedded pack barn. And that this is a, this would be diesel. And this would be increasing. I don't think it's going to kick you out if you don't put anything in these. These are all listed as optional, but it just helps the people reviewing this to understand kind of where these changes are coming from that are listed above. Okay, so now we're gonna go over to the greenhouse gas summary. And you know what I realized in my project info, I should have put, I'm not going to fill in all of these for the sake of this example, but I am going to put the total amount of funding requested. So I'm going to put in 50,000. So this is total. It's going to include basically everything that you're putting into your budget and asking for commission funding on for this project. And now we're going to go to our summary, and what's that's going to do is it's going to give us total greenhouse gas emission reductions that are expected from this project. And then it's going to give us those on the basis of, you know, per dollar of funding. So metric tons of CO2 equivalent reduction per dollar of funding. And there's some other metrics there, but essentially this, this one here is going to be the important one when we're scoring these applications. So now I'm going to go into the co-benefits, and there's a lot of equations working in the background here, and if you have questions about any of those, that background quantification methodology can help you with that. But one thing that's interesting here in this tool is it also calculates some of the co-benefits of these projects from reactive organic gases to NOx to PM 2.5 to diesel PM. So the negatives are emissions increases. So in this case, because we're burning more diesel, you're seeing increases in these pollutants. And local, I think, is just kind of from the actual burning of fuel in the area, where remote would be, I guess, something like electricity, where you're using power, but the emissions associated with that power might be happening elsewhere. It's also estimating soil health co-benefits, and then the reduction of fossil fuel use over 5 years, and an estimated fuel and energy cost savings over 5 years. I'm not exactly sure if the numbers it's using for this are current, so take that with a grain of salt. And if you really want to delve into the details on this, you can look at this for technical reviewers, because you really like spreadsheets and want to spend more time on them. And it'll show you kind of where it's coming up with some of these figures, and whether it's the methane that is decreasing or the CO2 that's decreasing. Anyway, you can really nerd out on that if you so choose. So that is the basics of this tool. Like I say, it's really this greenhouse gas summary tab that's going to be used in scoring. We're asking once you use it, if you can print it as a PDF with all the tabs and submit that as an attachment in your application. That will be the best format for us to receive this in. So that's one example. You can feel free to play around with other types of projects. Probably manure separators are going to be some of the most commonly funded projects, I'm guessing, through this funding source, but really any of those types of changes to manure management that we would expect to decrease methane and or decrease CO2 from fossil fuel burning for manure management purposes would be eligible. So I'm going to pause there. I know looking at spreadsheets as someone else walks through them is not on the top of my list of fun things to do. So I'm going to see if there's any questions that anyone has, kind of knowing that this tool is relatively new to me and we're kind of figuring this out together as we go. Okay.
Renee has a question. It says, I'm applying for a project to convert a diesel pump used to spread liquid manure to an electric pump. If I know how many hours the pump runs, how do I calculate the amount of electricity that would be used by the new pump? Is that based on the size of the new pump?
I see Chris
There's
Clark.
some spreadsheet somewhere.
I'm going to see if Chris has any ideas.
Yeah, Chris, help.
Yeah, Chris can save me, hopefully.
Yes, and in the case you're talking about, it's already in the energy audit, but there are some calculations that go with that. For instance, the example that you just put up there, that pump, if it's pumping 1,000 gallons a minute, it would have to run 21 hours a day to save 50 megawatts. There are some numbers out there that are there's a pump calculator from WSU for horsepower requirements to kilowatts to be able to use that, but also there's a number of different spreadsheets out there for that. The pump runtime and then the efficiency is the big one. Older pumps will have different efficiencies than newer pumps, so there's some of that needs to be looked at. Just replacing a pump with a more up-to-date pump can save energy just from having not being worn out. So a lot of pumps that have passed their lifespan are worn out, so they're pumping even more. It takes even more than what the book values are.
Good question.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions that come to mind?
You're welcome to just shout them out too.
I will mention that because I know we've had this question come up before, that if you're working with a producer who has funding from NRCS for some component of manure management that would have this reduction on greenhouse gas emissions impact, but maybe there's other pieces that NRCS is not funding, this may be a place where this commission funding can be paired with NRCS funding. So kind of we can talk about particulars as they come up, but we've had that question before, and there is this is a good use of this funding because we do sometimes have a little more flexibility in terms of what that looks like. Maybe that's all our questions. I don't want to end too soon, but I do want to say there's a couple of another question that came up previously that I should just mention here in case it's helpful for anyone. This funding can be used to replace an existing solid separator with a solid separator that has higher separation efficiency. So that is an eligible use for this funding. And I think there is in here an opportunity to make a few adjustments based on, I think it's for the partial scrape. For partial scrape systems, you enter the percentage of manure that's flushed on an annual basis. So that's one area where there's an adjustment. I thought there was a opportunity, separation efficiency. I guess if you're going to adjust that baseline solid separation efficiency, that has to be justified in the application. So kind of why that number is being adjusted. So I don't think that will be typical, but it does have a couple of places where, because they're using certain assumptions on typical separation efficiencies for different, different practices. So I think you can look into if you want to delve into the quantification methodology, you can probably find out what those numbers are. And yeah, if you have any, usually that's about as deep as anyone wants to go, is just to choose the option in the drop down that makes the most sense. But if you are interested in kind of what numbers are going into these calculations, you can do a deep dive into CARB's methodology if you so choose. So I guess, are there any other questions before we wrap it up? I think hearing none, I'm probably going to bring this webinar to a close. And yeah, I think it's a fairly straightforward tool to use. I don't think that user interface is going to be an issue. I think it's more if someone runs into a situation where they can't use it, but they're pretty sure their project still qualifies, then we need to talk through kind of next steps. But I think this will cover probably 95% of the projects that will come in for this funding. And yeah, like I say, feel free to get in touch with Nina or myself if you run into any problems using it. And have a good rest of your Friday afternoon.
Great. Thank you, Karen.